Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
I don't know about you, but I've never considered a biting tarantula familiar a good thing. Then again, when it comes to necromancy, there's always a price for power, especially when raising the dead. Now you might be wondering why I'm thinking about that. Well, I just got a sneak peek at issue 3 of My Neighbor Necromancer, the witchy, wonderfully weird comic I've already been a backer of, and I've been eagerly awaiting more of our novice necromancer apprentice Jessie's adventures with her flying undead lizard, Bivets. This story hits my sweet spot with its danger just beyond your doorstep kind of narrative. In this issue, Jessie continues her training with Ciareno and receives a mysterious invitation to the body farm. Now, I worked at the actual body farm in college, so when I heard that, I wonder what in the hell they were doing here. Will Jessie find friend or foe there? No spoilers here. I won't be accused of spilling the bones, so you just have to wait and see. This is hands down one of my top crowdfunding comic picks of the last few years, brought to life by an absolutely stacked creative team. Yeti fam Jack Foster contributes an extra backstory rendered in jaw-dropping watercolor, and you will find freaky familiars, undead mounts, a couple of new characters, one a mischievous group who look like a harpy kobold hybrid, and a mailman who hops bodies faster than the postal service changes shipping rates. If you like your magic a little messy and your monsters a little lovable, head to necrocomic.com or hit the link in the show notes so you don't miss the comic that's redefining life on the bright side of death.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I know I always say how excited I am, but I'm very, very excited to talk to today's guests. They have been nominated for an Ignatz Award, an Eisner Award. Their comic, Sunflowers, I thought was one of the most in personal and really incredible comics that I read recently. I really wanted to get them on the podcast after I read it. They were kind enough to send me a copy of their newest graphic novel, Hello Sunshine, which is coming out, I believe, September 23rd. It's absolutely incredible, and we're really going to talk about it. Just say that both of these stories deal with mental health, mental illness, and we're kind of really, we might be talking a lot about those topics. I think it's a really important topic, and these are absolutely incredible comics. Please welcome to the podcast, Keezy Young. Keezy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you? Thank you for
Uh,
the kind words.
I'm doing good. Um, Although I spent part of last night and this morning with Hello Sunshine, and just absolutely incredible. I
Thank you
want to
so
get
much.
into it. And I do wanna talk about it. But I just wanna touch on Sunflowers a little bit. For any listeners that are not, familiar with your work, um, Sunflowers is a very personal story for you about, I mean, you're very open in terms of your diagnosis, I believe, of bipolar, uh, disorder, um, and with, like, psychosis. And my background in my psychology degree was a number of years ago, so I don't wanna try and be too, technical about it, but you've created Sunflowers from really your perspective, uh, not only to kinda tell that part of your story a little bit, but kind of to destigmatize talking about mental health and mental illness, which we hear about a lot, and I feel like we've made I don't know, you can disagree with me. I think as a society, at least we've made some strides in terms of anxiety and depression, but one of the things that you
Definitely.
talk about is when, um, there's still a lot of misinformation, a lot of bad information, and a lot of stigma around, you know, bipolar disorder, what we used to like the DSM, the diagnosis, that the manual that lists everything in it, would previously listed as like manic depressive disorder. But especially when there's a degree of psychosis, there's still, so much bad information out there. Um, and it's really remarkable, I think, for you to and to put you like a piece of you in terms of sunflowers. I would think that that had to be, incredibly difficult when you first set out to do it. Like, was it, or did you feel like it was important enough that you kind of had to use your art in this way?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult, honestly. I had written so I started Hello Sunshine before I finished either of these comics I'm about to talk about, but, so I started Hello Sunshine in 2021, and then I wrote, a short comic called Just Going for a Walk, which is also autobiographical, but it's a little bit more like just a day in the life kind of thing. It wasn't really trying to break stigmas or anything like that. It was just literally my experience. And that was much easier to write because I wasn't trying to be informative at all. Um, I was sharing a piece of myself, and that was like a big step for me because I was not, open about having bipolar until pretty recently. Um, so that was an important step. And then sunflowers, I started actually the same year, and it's much more of it's still about my experiences, but it's much more of a informative kind of explanatory. Like this is what having bipolar is like, and here's what it facing the stigma is like, and that kind of thing. And I wrote out the whole thing, and then I sat on it for about a year before I actually drew it and finished it, because I wasn't sure if I really wanted to put that out there. I had to have, like, a bunch of conversations with friends and colleagues about, my comfort levels with it and what kind of things that I might face with having put this out there in terms of, stigma in the profession even. I am in a pretty good place compared to a lot of people professionally because I'm a cartoonist, so, um, it's much easier than if you're like a doctor, for example, to have bipolar disorder and be open about it. I
Right.
think you'd be hard pressed to find many like health professionals who are open about it. But I, I still had a lot of fears around it. So yeah, it was difficult.
And so once you decide, or at least get to a comfort level for yourself that I am going to do this. I've written this story out. So when you say you've written it out, you hadn't started drawing it at all yet?
Not at all. Yeah, I had put the text on the page. That was about it.
Okay. So to kind of turn to a more, I get, technical question in terms of your artwork. I'm really curious from that side of it. Once you decide to tell this, personal story, you have it written out, and you then have to come up with like a it's and to me it seemed like an entirely new like visual language as to how you are going to show these things that you experience them, that someone who doesn't have, you know, bipolar disorder, someone who's maybe never, you know, hasn't had this type of experience. Um, what was that process like to then kind of figure out how I'm going to show these things?
That was also a little bit tough, honestly, because I mean, you read Hello Sunshine. It's pretty straightforward for the most part. I'm a very like narrative storyteller usually. I like writing fiction. I like writing characters who are having conversations and that kind of thing. I do some experimental stuff in that book, but it's not to the same extent as something like Sunflowers, which isn't really a narrative in the same way. Um,
Right.
and so, yeah, I had to come up with a bunch of sort of imagery. I decided to use sunflowers as the central imagery because that's like something that my delusions tend to be focused on pretty heavily, especially when I'm manic. And they sort of grow with the sun and they turn their face toward the sun and then they turn their face down when the sun goes down. And that's a lot how I feel about my manias and my depressions. They're very sort of based on light for some reason. We don't really know exactly what's going on there, but light and heat are both triggers for mania and bipolar. So
Okay.
that was uh, something that um, kinda lost track of where I was going there. Oh, I was gonna say, the stars was the second one, and you only really see the stars, you see it at night, but only in the summer. So, Sunflowers is very much about the cycles of episodes, and I have depressive episodes in the winters, and I have, manic episodes in the summer, and so, I wanted to use this kind of imagery, in a meaningful way, and I thought it was really interesting actually that I sort of stumbled upon the same imagery that Vincent van Gogh uses. He's like most famous for sunflowers on Starry Night,
Starry Night, yeah.
arguably. And I didn't do it on purpose, but many people think that he could have had bipolar or possibly schizoaffective, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's something to the the almost incredible, like, universality is I might have pronounced that wrong, universality, of, like, the patterns that you find both in the night sky and in sunflowers, and so I tried to sort of pull some of that into the book, um, zooming in really, really close on the face of a sunflower, for example, when I'm talking about, like, severe mania, because
Mhm.
those patterns kind of suck you in, um, they become, like, all-encompassing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I didn't reading through Sunflowers, I didn't even think of the Van Gogh connection. But yeah, now that you mention it, that is interesting.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't think about it until way afterward, but, somebody pointed it out to me. I was like, "Oh, yeah."
um, it I mean, also, not only with sunflowers, and we'll turn to Hello Sunshine in a minute, but just, um, n you know, not only are you kind of doing this explanation as to how you experience things, but, as I mentioned earlier, you are kind of trying to destigmatize and talk about, bipolar disorder, and with how much did you have to kind of, like, dig into, like, well, to basically, explain things without it sounding like a textbook? Because you do a very, very good job in reading Sunflowers of, like, presenting, you know, if it's a character, although I know it is you, like, with so much empathy and, like, a real gentle hand, to kind of, you know, explain how you see things and how, like, your day to day, life is, or those episodes. What was that process like to kind of take all the things, I'm assuming learned in your own journey to a diagnosis to kind of, well, how do I want to present this information in a way that doesn't read like a textbook and is, you know, actually does some good here for somebody else that's going to pick this up?
Think I started from a place of just wanting to explain what my personal experience was,
Mhm.
and I think if you talk to most people that have severe mental illness, if you actually ask them what their personal experiences are, a lot of them will say things that, are kind of at odds with how we see severe mental illness, because we spend so much time thinking about how does SMI impact others negatively? How is it disruptive? How is it scary? And that kind of thing. But when you talk to somebody, for example, who's in like severe psychosis, most of the time, they're feeling very scared themselves. And so just by, revealing what this is like for me, I think it's easier to have compassion for somebody than if you're seeing it from a very outside perspective, or if you're seeing it from even like a relative's perspective or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, Most people don't really ask us, "What is it like?" That's not something that comes up very often. So that was how I started with. And then there is some like technical language in there. I talk about the difference between like hypomania and mania. I talk
Yeah.
about euthymia. I talk about all of the different kind of ways that you can treat severe mental illness, like medication and getting enough sleep and, being careful around drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole page on that. That's very much more technical. And I think it was important to include those things because that is how other people talk about us. And so for my doctor, for example, my psychiatrist, he last year he read it and he said that he was very interested in seeing the difference between how I experience hypomania versus mania. It's not a very, severe cutoff line. It's definitely like a spectrum. But
Mhm.
that was important to him as a mental health professional to know that these are the labels that I'm putting on these different states that he would also use to put on these different states. And I wrote it a lot for people like me to learn more about themselves and feel uh, more compassion toward themselves. But I
Yeah.
also wrote it for people like doctors and psychiatrists and family members, and so I had to kind of do a little bit of both, like both from the outside and from the inside.
Yeah, I mean, I thought all the information was presented, like, very well, and I don't
Me too.
I don't think it ever read like it was impenetrable, or I don't think it ever read like it was too, you know, simplistic. You have a very, you know, deft hand in terms of how you presented the information, both narratively, and visually, in
Thank you so much.
Sunflowers. And yeah, I mean, that's so interesting about your, your own psychiatrist because, I mean, I I know plenty of people, myself included, that just when we have like a cold or have something physically going on with us are terrible at explaining what we're feeling on the inside to then add on to a mental issue or emotional and just try and be able to communicate that. Um,
It's
I
really
have to
hard, yeah.
imagine, yeah, that adds a whole other, layer to it, and especially for anyone, is not familiar, there there is a lot of, you know, nuance, I guess, or, it is a spectrum really, in terms of issues like depression, clinical depression, anxiety, generalized anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. These are all, different things that have their own like diagnosis criteria and probably are experienced differently by the individuals that have them. So it's kind of fascinating to hear that your psychiatrist was interested in that, how you described it, because you're not just, in Sunflowers, you also have a visual depiction of it, which I think is very interesting as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it was, it's I have a very hard time, like, describing things realistically to my psychiatrist.
Mhm.
I tend to downplay everything, and I tend to also forget things. Very forgetful. I know that some of that is a symptom of bipolar. You tend to, have a trouble remembering things that happened during episodes, for example. Um, but I realized that the way that I communicate best is through comics. Like, that's always been true. It's my favorite mode of communication. So, um,
Right.
it was very helpful to be able to put my thoughts down in comic form and then hand that to my psychiatrist and have him be like, "Oh, I understand so much better now." I'm like, "Yes, because I'm good at comics."
You are very good at comics. I
Thank you.
will agree. Sunflowers is wonderful. I mean, it's I don't know. I feel weird saying like, oh, this very personal story about bipolar disorder is, with psychosis is a wonderful comic. So I don't like when people tell you that, and I'm sure others have. I mean, it was nominated for an Eisner Award. Like, how do you take that? Is that hard for you to hear that? Oh, this very personal thing I've put into a comics. Are you uh, I don't know, like, how do you take that? Is there a better way to say that this is a good comic as well as
I
a good, you know, a good thing that you've done?
I would say, like, it doesn't bother me at all to hear it. That's totally fine. I do have trouble sometimes, like, thanking people for saying it because they'll be like, "This was really, really meaningful to me. I feel so, I feel so empowered." And I'm like, "Good." I don't I don't really know, like, I'm so glad that I was able to help you. I don't know, that feels so weird to say, like, I have a really hard time with the response to it more than, like, hearing it.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Alright, so let's talk about Hello Sunshine. Um, is you said you had started this before, you had done Sunflowers. You were working on this for a long time. I mean, it
Mhm.
is so for listeners, in terms of the art, and we're gonna get into a couple different things, but I have, my copy of it here. It's a beautiful hardcover that I have. It's, I think, 300 and, like, 70 77 pages, so it is a sizable graphic novel. It is it is phenomenal. Um, I was just I flew through it, and I was surprised at how quickly the time passed going through it, but absolutely incredible story. I loved all of your characters, and there's a couple of things I wanna get into, but why don't you tell listeners how what is Hello Sunshine all about?
The Hello Sunshine is a YA horror graphic novel about a boy named Noah who comes back from Bible camp to discover that his secret boyfriend, Alex, has gone missing over the summer. Um, and he has to get together with Alex's friends and family to try to figure out what happened and whether Alex is still out there and if he might be dead and if it has anything to do with his mother's death 5 years before.
Y Yeah, I mean, and there I mean, that great synopsis, but there's so much to this story. You've broken it down in terms of, like, how the story is told, from different characters' perspectives. Noah, Sky, Izzy, uh, even Alex, and, um, Alex's, brother Jamie. Um, but, we kinda start from Noah's perspective. Noah comes back from Bible camp and doesn't really know that Alex, is missing. Um, so I thought it was a very interesting way to kinda get into it from Noah's perspective as Noah kind of pieces together and learns, like, what has happened. Alex had some type of issue, some type of episode. There's a bunch of rumors swirling around as to what exactly happened to Alex afterwards, and Noah kinda has to piece it together. I I thought you have such a good sense of character. I mean, this is, it's YA. It has some, I mean, romantic elements in it. Definitely has the horror elements to it. Um, I love how the characters like interact and talk to each other. Like right away, Noah's friends are asking him if he's if he's now a Jesus freak. I think his response is that he's no more of a Jesus freak than before he went to Bible camp. You have such a good sense of character, um, though.
Thank you.
Where do you think that comes from, or how have you developed that as a storyteller?
I think it's always been the thing that I'm most interested in other stories is the characters. I have a really hard time getting into stories where I don't connect with the characters at all. And
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily mean I have to like the characters, but I have to connect with them on some level. Um, Especially for I think when you're writing for kids, it's even more important in some ways. Um, because they don't really have enough experience to just connect to the experience. They kind of have to connect to the characters on some level. Um, and I don't know. I really like writing dialogue. I like writing the relationships. That's like my main important thing is the relationships between all these characters. Exploring like what are the problems there, what are the sticking points, but also like where is the love and how does it manifest in different ways. Um, that's like my favorite thing to do. So yeah, the first thing I started with was really the character of Alex.
Okay. Um, so that was your starting point. And did you like map out Alex's story first and then figure out what other characters you wanted to fit in there?
Yeah, I had a vague idea that I wanted to write something where it was like horror and it was supernatural, um, and it was also about mental illness. So it's so hard to have mental illness and to love horror stories and to constantly be running into this thing where, um, say somebody is hallucinating ghosts, and the solution to it is always either they are just hallucinating or it is actually ghosts. There's never like both. You can never have both going on, where somebody
Right.
is maybe seeing ghosts and they have a mental illness.
Yeah.
So it means that we kind of don't exist in horror. And so I wanted to write something that kind of confronted that and played with it a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I wrote out Alex's story to begin with, and then I started to fill in the other characters. Basically, I was inspired by Scooby-Doo. So if you look closely, you can see like the correlation between the Scooby-Doo characters and my characters. I think I went in different direction with them all, but
Yeah.
there's some framework there.
Okay. Oh, that's That I didn't even think of that as I mean, because at one point they're basically going through, more or less what is like your stand-in for a haunted house.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is very funny. Um, I guess is Noah Fred?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's Fred.
Okay.
Alex is Shaggy. Yeah.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin, strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? Question mark? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person fog of war capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show. I think I'm going to make Jimmy play a Goblin Warlock just to get even. Do you love sci-fi? Are you a horror fan? Maybe you prefer action or fantasy. 2000 AD has it all and should be on your radar, with a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog to Rogue Trooper, Shakara Halo Jones, and many more. Every weekly issue, you get 5 action-packed thrills from incredible creators such as Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Alex DeCampi, Dan Abnett, and so many others. Get a print subscription and it'll arrive to your door every week. And your first issue is free, or subscribe digitally. Get free back issues and download DRM-free copies of every issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. That's like a whole graphic novel's worth. All subscribers get amazing offers like discount vouchers and exclusive product offers. Head to 2000ad.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app. And why wait? Start reading today. I'll put links in the show notes for you. Welcome back.
I love the interactions with all the characters. I loved getting to know them. I loved that Noah was the first. That it didn't start with Alex's perspective, that it started with Noah because Noah's like the new kid in town. Also, he's coming into the situation after the summer, not knowing what has happened to Alex and where Alex is. And he's not really friendly with Alex's brother Jamie or, with Sky and Izzy. And, so we as the reader, we're kind of along with Noah, right away,
Mhm.
because we're also as Noah's relationship is developing with the 3 of them, and we're learning more about his relationship with Alex, like, we're also learning about all these characters. So narratively, I love that. I'm already in. Um, I really liked, Noah. I I liked how introspective Noah was, like, when we get things, from his perspective, like, when he's kind of, like, I guess, writing, like, in his prayer journal, I think is how it starts with, like,
Mhm.
the narrative captions, and he's talking about, you know, what he is hoping God will do in terms of look out for Alex and different things. But he's also talking about himself in terms of like his relationship with his friend Grayson. And he doesn't think he's, meaning Noah, is as good as a person as he like thinks he should be or thinks he was or wants to be. I thought all of that was very interesting. And it's great later on when the other characters in very like simple ways are commenting on Noah's character, which I think says a lot. Like, it comes up a few times where they already know things about Noah that Noah hasn't revealed, and
Mhm.
they say because he's not subtle. And I thought it was such a great callback to the beginning where we can see that Noah is not subtle and, like, the other characters commenting on it, like, Noah doesn't really realize that about himself. I think he thinks that he's holding things in more so than
Yeah.
maybe he is. So I loved a lot of, I loved a lot of that stuff, and, all the other characters, Sky, Izzy, you have such a great take on who these characters are and really develop their stories and their relationship to Alex in such a wonderful way. Izzy's in particular, um, the way Izzy talks about, herself, and she's kind of afraid to speak up. She doesn't want anybody to think her ideas are stupid. She's kinda happy to be a follower at times and to just go along. Um, her story arc, I was so kind of, like, taken by, and, um,
I'm really
that
glad to
might
hear that.
that might have been, like, that might have been maybe my favorite chapter because I feel like I didn't know a whole lot about Izzy, and man, I don't know if it's part 3, when you get to
Yeah, I
Izzy's
think so.
chapter and we start, you know, learning more about Izzy, how she likes the occult, and fantastic character.
Yay. I'm so glad.
Loved all
I
the
have a
little
hard
things
time
about it.
I had a hard time writing her,
Oh,
compared
really?
to the others, yeah, 'cause I'm not shy myself at all, so I was struggling a little with, how do I make this character, like, feel realistic and relatable just coming
Right.
from my perspective of, like, I'm pretty social, I'm an extrovert, so
Yeah, I think for me, and I'm kind of the same way, like, I can turn it on and be, very social, but I think there are times when I'm happy to let somebody else I'm not a very I say that I'm a lawyer, but I'm not very confrontational with my regular life. I picked a terrible profession for somebody who is not does not like confrontation. I'm happy to let in a group project, I'll participate. I'm happy for somebody else to take the lead. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that
I
was
just felt so much empathy for Izzy when she starts kind of talking about, not like being afraid to speak up or just thought that was great. I thought it is handled very well.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to basically, I did, like, think about, like, what are the things that I do relate to for somebody who is, an introvert or shyer or that kind of thing. And, like, that was one of the big ones is, like, I don't wanna mess up. I don't wanna suggest something that is going to be, like, leading to a bad outcome, and having be my fault. So I totally even as an extrovert, like, I totally also try to avoid confrontation, and I don't necessarily wanna be the leader all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, just a great way, into her character. But I wanted to talk uh, about a couple of things and not just the characters, but the visuals in this book because, I don't want to like spoil too much about it, but the characters in their search for Alex, I think I can say they learn that there are these things that Alex has been seeing and that maybe, you know, Alex's, uh, mother had also seen, whether or not they're monsters or, demons or whatever it might be. And, there are parts of the book where we're kind of seeing things from Alex's, perspective when these things are happening. And, real quick, you do you letter the book as well?
I do, yes.
Okay. So, um, and I wanted to know before I go on, because when we see the visuals of how Alex experiences these things, um, they're terribly creepy, and your lettering, and I'm like a lettering nerd, like I love lettering in comics. Your lettering's phenomenal.
Oh my gosh, thank
Um,
you.
I mean, because you have so many little different, not just how letter it and all the stuff letterers talk about. We got to follow your eye's going to follow all the wording down the page, and we don't want things to be confusing, like all the basic stuff. But like the effects that are in this book, um, every little click and every little sound. I mean, it is so good. And you do a ton, I thought, in terms of the lettering, because one of Alex's issues or symptoms is that he hears like a voice or hears something talking to him or whatever it might be. And you really at times like the as his as it gets more severe for him, like you start crowding the page, and it is so effective um from a comic standpoint to kind of get across like how loud it must be in Alex's head. And I thought that was unbelievably well done. So, which I thought was a little different than some of the stuff you did in Sunflowers, because you're talking about two different things in terms of what is going on with Alex. But what was like in terms of the horror of it? Because you are like a horror movie fan, and how did you come up with like the visuals of what you wanted these things to look like? That are kind of the source, I guess, of what Alex is dealing with.
Um, so it took me a while to figure that kind of thing out. For one thing, I had been lettering stuff for quite a while, but I had never really learned how to letter. I was just sort of mimicking other people, and going by vibes. And so I picked up
Lettering
yeah,
by vibes.
basically, yes. Um, so I picked up Nate Piekos's book. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name right. Um, and he's a professional letterer who's
Yep.
amazing. I'm sure you know who he is. Um,
Anyone familiar with Blambot? Yeah, and
yeah.
or has picked up any comic in the past like decade has probably read his work.
Yeah, for sure. And so he wrote a book about how to letter, and so I finally read that through like 3 or 4 times in a row to like try to, get as much out of it as I could because I wanted to do a really, really good job for this book because of what you're talking about with Alex, hearing voices. Um, it's in reality, when you hear a voice, it does come from the outside. I think a lot of people think that it's like an internal voice, but it's actually very different from like an intrusive thought. You're actually hearing it like in the environment. Um, when I hear voices, for example, I'll often think that it's somebody behind me who's shouting something for me to do,
Oh,
or I'll
right.
think that it's my neighbors that are talking about me. I'm actually hearing them through the wall. I'm Of course I'm not actually. That's just a symptom of my illness, but like it feels very, very real. You can't really tell the difference. Sometimes people will have voices that sound scarier, like they sound like a demon is talking or something like that. But they still or maybe they sound like a loved one that's talking to you, something like that. But they still are coming from outside of your head. So that was the first thing I had to kind of figure out how to do was how to portray these voices as happening in the environment as opposed to just in Alex's head. And so I did that by having their tails basically go like into drawers and behind doors and things like that. Um, I did have a lot of voices that are handwritten, because I did want them to sound kind of scary, like
Mhm.
maybe they're doing voices or something like that. And my handwriting just happens to be sort of naturally scary because I have terrible handwriting, but so that wasn't very hard. It's a little bit difficult to make it legible enough, but I and I did different kinds of techniques with the balloons themselves to also make it both blend better with the art because I didn't want them to be too intrusive at first. That was a big thing. Because it's just a lot of lettering on every page. And I needed us to be able to focus more on what the actual action is happening, the dialogue that Alex is having with his loved ones or whatever, and not just on these voices, which are kind of commenting on things that are happening, but they're not really part of the action per se a lot of the time. And so I did want it to be, something that people could follow pretty easily. Um, and then over time, I could add more balloons that just look like normal voice, dialogue, um, to kind of demonstrate that Alex is getting worse and he's not able to tell the difference anymore between what is this demon voice or a demon voice versus like what is what are his classmates saying and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it was fun to try to figure out ways to use the lettering to, it's mostly auditory, and, it's hard to put auditory stuff on the page sometimes. You have to depict everything visually, and, it's hard to do things like have multiple voices happening at once. You have to do you can do overlapping speech balloons, but then it's covering up the art, which is not the case if you're actually experiencing it. You're not literally seeing speech balloons, like, pop up around your head and cover up the world around you. So, I had to kind of work between some of these things and figure out ways to do it.
Yeah, no, but no, I understand, and I can imagine how difficult it was. But yeah, there are times, especially I have the book open, well, I'm looking at it now, but when you get into chapter 4, like, when you really get into, like, Alex's story, um, especially he has dinner at one point, it's like a bit of a flashback. He has dinner at Noah's house, um, and y like, the the kind of, like, smashing together of some of the speech balloons, and some of them will, like, overlap a little bit, and they kind of fill in the space, like, around, um Alex. I just think it was, you know, so, effective. Whether or not, like, at one point you kind of use, like, a red and maybe a pinkish color, but there are typically, like, a light gray or a darker gray as opposed to, like, the white of, you know, things that are actually being said in the room, in the
Mhm.
panel. And I just thought it's unbelievably, um, effective. And also,
I'm so
like,
glad.
I also at times, like, you fit so much into this, like, there is nary a space when things start getting bad for Alex in terms of when his symptoms are really becoming severe, where there are faces in the background, there are there are eyes. I mean, it is a, like, harrowing experience, and especially when you start having the speech bubbles of the voices he is hearing start to break out from the panels. They it feels like, um, the reading experience that they are not they are not being, contained, and then they are physically not contained within the panel that Alex is in. I thought was, one of the things I love about comics. It's this, it's a very almost unnerving experience reading it. And I
Yeah.
just think it really adds to the empathy to Alex, because there's so much that comes out in the story about what Alex is going through, and I think your idea of taking somebody who has a mental illness and adding in these supernatural elements where it's not, "Oh, it's all supernatural," or, "Oh, it's all that they're mentally ill," is something that I don't think has been done. And you do it so well.
Thank you.
And the relationship, I don't wanna say too much, but the relationship that comes through with Alex and his brother Jamie, who are fraternal twins, I think.
Mhm.
Um, the relationship that we see between the 2 of them um, is remarkable. I I was, like, blown away really, by the character of Jamie that we meet in the beginning, and then the amount of, um, like, empathy and love and compassion he, shows his brother, at times in the story, I thought was really remarkable. And the thing I took away from it, um, the most.
Yeah, I think that was, like, the most important relationship for me writing it as well, was between
Mhm.
Alex and Jamie. Jamie was definitely, like, the 2nd character that I came up with. He's the only one that's not from Scooby-Doo. Um, and, I I just really wanted to explore, these 2 kids who are they're dealing with the same sort of backstory in a lot of ways, but they're dealing with it in very, very different ways and sort of unhealthy ways, both of them. Alex has, like, some toxic positivity going on. He doesn't really wanna talk about the negative things. Jamie
Yeah.
only wants to focus on the negative things that, happen with their mom and that kind of thing. And, Jamie's arc has a lot to do with trying to find a way to love Alex while also, um, he hasn't healed completely. I don't think anybody in the book has, like, healed from their experience, like, 100%. I've just sort of set them on the pathway to it, and, it was fun to try to find a way to present that with Jamie because he has, like, a lot of work to do. Um,
Yeah. I
and,
mean, Jamie's so angry, and
yeah.
you understand why. And he he has no problem, I think, voicing his anger, and
Mhm.
you know, Jamie's journey to me seems like somebody who really has to he has to find space within himself that can contain both the it doesn't have to be all one or the other, doesn't have to
Mhm.
be all anger or all love. Um, he's gotta find a way for those 2 things to fit together, and it's, very interesting, and I just thought I think you handled it very well.
Thank you.
I can't imagine that not 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 just to write and draw and do all this work for, what did I say, 377-page graphic novel, but this is a story that very easily could have, you know, been executed poorly in terms of well, I mean, in terms of what you're trying, you know, to accomplish with these characters and to not make it seem, hokey or corny or to not make it seem like the 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 ending falls flat or to not make it seem like you've leaned too much in the horror of it or too
Mhm.
much in, um, in
I really, really didn't
mental
want it to
illness,
be
though.
like an after school special. That was
Right.
that was the main thing that I was sort of concerned about it because it is writing for kids, so there is a certain amount of, like, teaching them that you have to do because to sort of get them caught up a little bit, with where they need to be to understand the book and just in general because most people don't know anything about severe mental illness. So, there are some scenes where I have to talk about, like, this is what it is and, here's some ways to deal with it and that kind of thing. But,
Yeah.
I hopefully I did that in a non after school special way.
No, I think you did. I want if we could just, I know you talked about, um, the some of the visuals in here, but if I would like to focus on something in particular, and I think it's in chapter 4, and something that I thought was like a couple of pages that is just absolutely tremendous. We kind of the incident that we learn early on that preceded Alex's disappearance is something that he had a knife, maybe there was a threat. The police might have been involved, like, Noah learns about it a little bit, and we learn a little bit more as things go on from Noah's perspective, but you have a part in the book where we see, like, what Alex was experiencing at that time, and it's the paneling is, um, not standard format by any stretch of the imagination. The lettering is there's stuff, like, all over the place, but it's it's odd in that none of it is just messy. You have these elements of, like, laughing, which almost look like it was done, uh, with my mom once sponge painted my brother's room, and, like, there's, like, ha-has that kind of have that effect. There's, like, breaking glass. It 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 is terrifying. And it goes on for, I mean, at least I think like 6 pages of it, and then it kinda culminates with, like a mostly black page, and there is, some things on it, but, what was it like to try and develop that and to say, "Okay, I am basically telling the story of this character who has gotten to the point we've slowly kind of been building to showing he has a psychotic episode, um, and there's kind of a break with reality because of what is going on, these voices he's hearing, all these other things, these intrusive thoughts. What was it like developing that, and like how did you get to this is how I want to show it?
This was, honestly the hardest scene of the entire book,
Yeah.
for a bunch of reasons, or all the reasons that you were talking about. Um, it's like it's the crisis moment for Alex, and it's kind of the thing that everything else is built around, so I knew it was really important to get it right. Um, and it's also the point where I struggled a little bit with, whether to, give him a knife. I ended up giving him a butter knife to kind of go a little bit in between to show that I totally understand why people might be afraid of somebody in that position, if somebody's wielding a knife or breaking windows or that kind of thing. But,
Yeah.
from Alex's point of view, he's actually the one who's most in danger and he's most scared, and I really needed people to have compassion for that because of who the character is, but also, because in real life, that's a big threat to people with severe mental illness is when you're in a
Oh.
crisis moment, having a police encounter can be deadly. Um
Oh, yeah, I mean, how many unfortunately, uh, I don't have statistics, but anyone who's watched the news in the past, we don't have to go back very far. Have we not read a news story or seen a news story about somebody who was, like, in a crisis and their lost their life because of police involvement because they were killed by the police?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I've
eh
I've lost somebody myself, to that kind of thing, a few years
oh,
back,
I'm
so
so sorry, Keezy.
thank you. Um, so it was really important to me to portray that kind of experience, in a compassionate way and, but also in a realistic way, because a lot of people who are in crisis do things that we see as scary or dangerous or maybe, you know, uh, what's the word? Like aggressive. And
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily mean that they deserve violence committed against them either. We need to have empathy for those people too. Um, People who are yelling, yelling mean things or doing property damage or threatening other people. These people also deserve compassion and empathy and care. Um, Most of the time, they're not doing it out of hatred or bigotry or anything like that. Most of the time, they're doing it out of fear, at least in this particular mental illness kind of case.
Right.
Yeah.
And you do that very well, uh, amongst all the chaos of what Alex is experiencing. Like when you show him in his face, he looks terrified. He looks like he is in pain. I do think it's good. You do have like somebody on the outside at one point even say, "Look at him, he's so scared." Um, to really drive that home in terms of what it is he is like possibly going through. Um, but yeah, out of I think even more so than some of the the demons, the talker or Daisy Eyes, who I hope I don't see tonight when I fall asleep because the visuals are alarming. This I thought was the most like stressful part of reading this.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
there's just so much going on the page, and it's the energy of it is really really scary, especially because like you up to this point you have everybody looking for Alex, and what we've seen from Alex in flashbacks is, man, he seems to be a really like sweet kid. He's got some
Mhm.
stuff, but it's just like, oh man, this is this really is, I think, powerful in terms of how it's portrayed. And um I just thought it was, yeah, I thought it was incredible
Thank
from
you.
a comic standpoint. I thought it was incredible from a story standpoint. I too, I just thought it was really remarkable.
Yeah, I feel like the horror of Hello Sunshine is definitely I wanted to kinda turn it around, and instead of having the scary part of it be, Alex himself, it's more like watching him go through this and being scared for him is the scariest part.
Yeah, I think if I think you nailed it, in terms of it.
Yay.
I just thought it's I don't know that I've seen I mean, I have to agree with you. I don't know that I've seen, anything like this. I'm way behind on my horror movies. I used to be a huge horror movie fan. I just have not been able to catch up in the past couple of years. I'm very familiar with, most of the classics, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think I've seen anything, quite like this. And when without giving too much away, when we kind of start to get into um, when the Scooby Gang starts to kind of figure out what, like, might be going on, I thought, "Oh, this is gonna be interesting to see how it lands." Like, just from a story perspective, I was like, "This has gotta be really tough to do because 'cause I'm trying to think, "Wow, if I was given the task to kind of write something like this, like, how would I do it and not make it seem like I'm like, not taking serious enough the mental illness aspect of it
Right.
and how much of it I'm leaning more so into the horror of it, like, it's a that's a that's a really fine line, and especially that, and, uh, man, when I got through it, I was like, "Damn." Like, I thought I was unbelievably, like, impressed. I just thought
My gosh,
it made
thank you so
sense.
much.
I was like I was trying to think of any holes in it, and I was just like, "No." I think what you tried to set out to do, I think unbelievably, like, noble, courageous to try and, like, important for you because you wanna see you in the horror movies. You said, like,
Mhm.
feel like, you know, you're either is somebody or not you personally, but somebody who has, mental health issues, who has a diagnosis, they're either the villain or, what they're seeing is just part of their symptoms, whatever it might be, or it's an allegory, you
Right.
know. Um, and I just thought how unbelievably difficult a task. And, you know, damn it if you didn't knock it out of the park.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me to hear, honestly.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely incredible. Um, so I don't there's not a question there. I just if you've ever listened to a
I'll
single
just
episode of
bask
this
in it, yeah.
yeah, if you ever listen to a single episode of this podcast, I I do sometimes I do a bad job asking questions. I just kind of, I just say what I like about it. I don't know. I think people listen, so, they're used to it by now. I do try and ask some questions at times,
I
but
like the questions you've had so far, so.
oh, well, thank you. Here's the other thing I wanted to mention. When you start to do Alex's chapter, you start to put, like, the music that Alex is
Oh, yeah.
listening to, and I was, like, doing some internet research. I'm like, "How how old are they? How old is Keezy Young?" Because, like, I thought the soundtrack was, like, great, um, but there's some, like, mellow tunes, like, I think, it was Monkeys, Daydream Believer, Crimson and
Yeah.
Clover, um
Yeah, it's, like, all 60s. There's one I have Perfect Day in there by Lou Reed, which is, I think, like,
yeah.
72 or something, but the others
Right,
are all
it's a lot
60s.
of it's a lot of '60s music, and I remember. I mean, I'm 46, so I wasn't, I'm not that old where I was alive when that stuff was on, but I just remember shooting pool in my parents' basement and listening to, like, my dad's old records, and it was a lot of that, and
Mhm.
I thought, "All right, well, Alex has some pretty good taste in music."
Yeah, I had a oldies station when I was a kid that was, our local station, so I listened to a whole lot of that music, and, my parents like it too. They were both born in the '60s, but they still kinda like that era of music, so I
Yeah,
grew up with the Mamas and the Papas and all that kinda stuff, and, when I started writing this story, like, the first thing that I had Alex's character. I knew that I wanted him to be, the mentally ill character who has this kind of arc, and I was
right.
like, "What else about him is sort of unique or interesting?" And I would happen to be listening to the Mamas and the Papas at the time, so I was like, "Maybe he likes the same kind of music as I do." Um, yeah. Very, very like, a lot of mellow tunes, like, a lot of happy tunes,
Yeah,
Perfect Day aside, it's a lot of things that you wouldn't really sort of anticipate for this kind of story. And I kind of like that dichotomy, and as a way to also like show people that Alex is this kind of character. Like he's a stoner and he's kind of mellow and happy and very friendly, and he likes pleasant
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and there was one song that I didn't recognize the name of it that I did actually have to go to Spotify to listen to, and I had heard it before, and I thought a great song. Alright, let me pull up my Spotify because I probably searched it. Probably still on here. Oh yeah, Jimmy Ruffin's "Farewell
Yeah,
Is a Lonely Sound." Oh.
yeah, I love that song.
Um, well, Keezy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about sunflowers and Hello Sunshine. Is there anything else that you want to shout out while you're here?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess just definitely check out Hello Sunshine when it comes out. That would be great if everybody did that.
Yeah, I'll put a link so folks can pick it up. But it's Little Brown and Company is the publisher.
Yep.
Yep, and yeah, it absolutely gorgeous hardcover book. Um, It is it is phenomenal,
Thank you
and,
so much.
yeah, look, and if listeners who normally listen to the podcast, if for any reason, and I've probably said this before, if like the YA, if you're somebody that tunes out when you hear that about a book or a comic, knock it off, stop it. These are these are great stories, and I read plenty of stuff that's, adult or that considered YA, and this is a fantastic comic that um I think is it's just doing something I haven't seen before. I think the artwork in it is tremendous. So don't be like that if you hear YA about a book and you tune out because you're missing out on a lot of great stuff, and including Hello Sunshine. So um
Agreed.
all right. Shout out to my brother Bobby, Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. I shout out to Bobby on every episode because Bobby listens. So, hey Bob, how you doing? By the time you're listening to this, you're probably back from Iceland. So I hope you had a nice time. Um, all right, listeners, thanks for listening. Rate, review us. Let me know what it is you're reading, especially if you read Sunflowers. I'd love to talk about it. And Hello Sunshine is going to be out from Little Brown and Company September 23rd. Make sure you get a copy of it. Let me know what you think. And thanks to Keezy for coming on the podcast.
Thank
So,
you so much for having me.
all right. So, thank you, everybody. Good night. And I'll see you next time.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.